The Yazidis are an ethnically Kurdish religious community or an ethno-religious group indigenous to northern Mesopotamia. Yazdanism is an ancient religion that is strictly endogamous. Yazidism is not linked to Zoroastrianism but rather to ancient Mesopotamian religions. Even though they are ethnically Kurdish, Yazidis are a distinct and independent religious community with their own unique culture. They live primarily in the Nineveh province of Iraq. Additional communities in Armenia, Georgia, Turkey, Iran, and Syria exist as well. The number of Yazidis in the native lands has been in decline since the 1990s as a result of significant migration to Europe, especially to Germany. The Yazidis are monotheists believing in God as creator of the world, which he has placed under the care of 7 holy beings or angels, the chief of whom is Melek-Taus, the Peacock Angel. The Peacock Angel, as world ruler, causes both good and bad to befall individuals, and this ambivalent character is reflected in myths of his own temporary fall from God's favor, before his remorseful tears extinguished the fires of his hellish prison and he was reconciled with God. This belief builds on Sufi mystical reflections on Iblis, who refused to prostrate to Adam despite God's express command to do so. Because of this connection to the Sufi Iblis tradition, some followers of other monotheistic religions of the region equate the Peacock Angel with their own unredeemed evil spirit Satan, which has incited centuries of persecution of the Yazidis as devil worshippers. Persecution of Yazidis has continued in the home communities within the borders of modern Iraq, under fundamentalist Sunni Muslim revolutionaries. Starting in August 2014, the Yazidis were targeted by the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant in its campaign to purify Iraq and neighboring countries of non-Sunni and non-Islamic influences. Demographics. Historically, the Yazidis lived primarily in communities in locales that are in present-day Iraq, Turkey, and Syria, and also had significant numbers in Armenia, Georgia, and Iran. However, events since the 20th century have resulted in considerable demographic shift in these areas as well as mass emigration. As a result, population estimates are unclear in many regions, and estimates of the size of the total population vary. The bulk of the Yazidi population lives in Iraq, where they make up an important minority community. Estimates of the size of these communities vary significantly, between 70,000 and 500,000. They are particularly concentrated in northern Iraq in the Nineveh province. The two biggest communities are in Shekan, northeast of Mosul, and in Sinjar, at the Syrian border 80 kilometers west of Mosul. In Shekan is the shrine of Sheikh Hadi ibn Musafir at Lalish. During the 20th century, the Shekan community struggled for dominance with a more conservative Sinjar community. The demographic profile has probably changed considerably since the beginning of the Iraq War in 2003 and the fall of Saddam Hussein's regime. Yazidis in Syria live primarily in 2 communities, one in the Al Jazeera area and the other in the Kurdish. Population numbers for the Syrian Yazidi community are unclear. In 1963, the community was estimated at about 10,000, according to the national census, but numbers for 1987 were unavailable. There may be between about 12,000 and 15,000 Yazidis in Syria today, though more than half of the community may have emigrated from Syria since the 1980s. Estimates are further complicated by the arrival of as many as 50,000 Yazidi refugees from Iraq during the Iraq War. The Turkish Yazidi community declined precipitously during the 20th century. By 1982, it had decreased to about 30,000, and in 2009, there were fewer than 500. Most Turkish Yazidis have immigrated to Europe. particularly Germany. Those who remain reside primarily in the former heartland of Tur-Abdin. Population estimates for the communities in Georgia and Armenia vary, but they too have declined severely. In Georgia, the community fell from around 30,000 people to fewer than 5,000 during the 1990s. The numbers in Armenia may have been somewhat more stable. There may be around 40,000 Yazidis still in Armenia. Most Georgian and Armenian Yazidis have relocated to Russia, which recorded a population of 31,273 Yazidis in the 2002 census. This mass emigration has resulted in the establishment of large Yazidi diaspora communities abroad. The most significant of these is in Germany, which now has a Yazidi community of more than 100,000 Yazidis living primarily in Celle, Bremen, Bad Oeynhausen, and Oldenburg. Most are from Turkey and, more recently, Iraq, and live in the western states of North Rhine-Westphalia and Lower Saxony. Since 2008, Sweden has seen sizable growth in its Yazidi emigrant community, which had grown to around 4,000 by 2010, and a smaller community exists in the Netherlands. Other Yazidi diaspora groups live in Belgium, Denmark, France, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, and Australia. These have a total population of probably less than 5,000. In August 2007, some 500 Yazidis were killed in a coordinated series of bombings in Khartoum that became the deadliest suicide attack since the Iraq War began. In August 2009, at least 20 people were killed and 30 wounded in a double suicide bombing in northern Iraq, an Iraqi Interior Ministry official said. 2 suicide bombers with explosive vests carried out the attack at a cafe in Sinjar, west of Mosul. In Sinjar, many townspeople are members of the Yazidi minority. The Salafist militant group, the so-called Islamic State, which considers the Yazidis devil worshippers, captured Sinjar in August 2014 following the withdrawal of Peshmerga troops, forcing up to 50,000 Yazidis to flee into the nearby mountainous region. Threatened with death at the hands of militants, they face starvation in the mountains, and the plight received international media coverage, leading American President Barack Obama to authorize humanitarian airdrops of food and water onto Sinjar Mountain and U.S. airstrikes against militants in support of the beleaguered religious minority. American humanitarian assistance began on the 7th of August 2014, with Royal Air Force subsequently contributing to the relief effort. At an emergency meeting in London, Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott also pledged humanitarian support, while European nations resolved to join the US in helping to arm Peshmerga fighters, aiding the Yazidis with more advanced weaponry. Although Kurdish troops managed to rescue several thousand Yazidi refugees via a humanitarian corridor, helping them cross the Tigris into Syria. One relief worker in the evacuation operation described the conditions on Mount Sinjar as a genocide, having witnessed hundreds of corpses. Origins: the Yazidi people speak Kurmanji Kurdish and adhere to the religion Yazidism, a religion rooted in Iranian religions blended with elements of pre-Islamic Mesopotamian religious traditions. Although they speak mostly Kurdish, their ethnicity is obscure. Commentators identify the Yazidis as predominantly Kurds, but according to some sources, they tend to regard themselves as distinct from Kurds. Many Yazidis say that Kurds are originally Yazidi who shifted culturally after they adopted Islam. The United Nations recognizes the Yazidis as a distinct ethnic group. A report from Human Rights Watch in 2009 declares that to incorporate disputed territories in northern Iraq, particularly the Nineveh province, into the Kurdish region, KRG and Kurdish authorities have embarked on a two-pronged strategy of inducement and repression. The HRW report also criticizes heavy-handed tactics. According to report, the goal of these tactics is to push Shabak and Yazidi communities to identify as ethnic Kurds. The Kurdish authorities are working hard to impose Kurdish identity on two of the most vulnerable minorities in Iraq, the Yazidis and the Shabaks. The principal holy site is in Lalish, northeast of Mosul. The Yazidis' own name for themselves is Yazidi or in some areas, Dasini. Some scholars have derived the name Yazidi from Old Iranian Yazata, and some Yazidis themselves believe that the name is derived from the word Yazdan or Ezid, God. Though the current consensus among Western academics support the widespread idea that it is a derivation from Umayyad Caliph Yazid I, who is revered as Sultanezi. The Yazidis' cultural practices are observed in Kurdish, and all speak Kurdish language. Kurdish language is the language of almost all the orally transmitted religious traditions of the Yazidis. The religion of the Yazidis, Yazidism, is a kind of Yazdanism and has many influences. Sufi influence and imagery can be seen in the religious vocabulary, especially in the terminology of the Yazidis' esoteric literature, but much of the theology is non-Islamic. Their cosmogonies apparently have many points in common with those of ancient Persian religions. Early writers attempted to describe Yazidi origins, broadly speaking, in terms of Islam, or Persian, or sometimes even pagan religions. However, research published since the 1990s has shown such an approach to be simplistic. The origin of Yazidism is now usually seen by scholars as a complex process of syncretism, whereby the belief system and practices of a local faith had a profound influence on the religiosity of adherents of the Adoriya Sufi order, living in the Yazidi mountains, and caused it to deviate from Islamic norms relatively soon after the death of its founder, Sheikh Adi ibn Musafir, who is said to be of Umayyad descent. He settled in the valley of Lalis in the early 12th century. Sheikh Adi himself, a figure of undoubted orthodoxy, enjoyed widespread influence. He died in 1162, and his tomb at Lalis is a focal point of Yazidi pilgrimage. According to the Yazidi calendar, April 2012 marked the beginning of the year 6762. During the 14th century, important Yazidi tribes whose sphere of influence stretched well into what is now Turkey are cited in historical sources as Yazidi. According to Muhammad as-Sarrastani, the Yazidis are the followers of Yazid and Unaysa, who kept friendship with the first Mahakama before the Azrika. It is clear, then, that as-Sarrastani finds the religious origin of this interesting people in the person of Yazid and Unaysa. We are to understand, therefore, that to the knowledge of the writer, B. and Unaysa is the founder of the Yazidi sect, which took its name from him. Quote, now, the first Mahakama is an appellative applied to the Muslim schismatics called al-Awari. According to this, it might be inferred that the Yazidis were originally a Arijid subsect. Quote, Yazid, moreover, is said to have been in sympathy with al-Abadiyya, a sect founded by Abdallah ibn Abbad. Religious beliefs. Yazidis are monotheists believing in one God, who created the world and entrusted it into the care of a heptad of 7 holy beings, often known as angels or Heftzer. Preeminent among these is Tauz-Melek, the peacock angel, the Kittab-ul-Way, Book of Illumination, which claims to be the words of Tauz-Melek, and which presumably represents Yazidi belief, states that he allocates responsibilities, blessings and misfortunes as he sees fit, and that it is not for the race of Adam to question him. Sheikh Hadi believed that the spirit of Ta'uz-Melek was the same as his own, perhaps as a reincarnation. He is reported to have said, "I was present when Adam was living in paradise, and also when Nimrod threw Abraham in fire. I was present when God said to me, 'You are the ruler and Lord on the earth.' God, the compassionate, gave me 7 earths and throne of the heaven." Yazidi accounts of creation differ from that of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They believe that God first created Ta'uz-Melek from his own illumination and the other 6 archangels were created later. God ordered Ta'uz-Melek not to bow to other beings. Then God created the other archangels and ordered them to bring him dust from the earth and build the body of Adam. Then God gave life to Adam from his own breath and instructed all archangels to bow to Adam. The archangels obeyed except for Ta'uz-Melek. In answer to God, Ta'uz-Melek replied, "How can I submit to another being? I am from your illumination while Adam is made of dust." Then God praised him and made him the leader of all angels and his deputy on the earth. Hence, the Yazidis believe that Ta'uz-Melek is the representative of God on the face of the earth and comes down to the earth on the first Wednesday of Nisan. Yazidis hold that God created Ta'uz-Melek on this day, and celebrate it as New Year's Day. Yazidis argue that the order to bow to Adam was only a test for Ta'uz-Melek, since if God commands anything then it must happen. In other words, God could have made him submit to Adam, but gave Ta'uz-Melek the choice as a test. They believe that the respect and praise for Ta'uz-Melek is a way to acknowledge his majestic and sublime nature. This idea is called knowledge of the sublime. Sheikh Hadi has observed the story of Ta'uz-Melek and believed in him. One of the key creation beliefs held by Yazidis is that they are the descendants of Adam through his son Shafid bin Jah rather than Eve. The Yazidi holy books are claimed to be the Kitab al-Way and the Mishafirez. However, scholars generally agree that the manuscripts of both books published in 1911 and 1913 were forgeries written by non-Yazidis in response to Western travelers and scholars' interest in the Yazidi religion. The material in them is consistent with authentic Yazidi traditions. However, true texts of those names may have existed, but remain obscure. The real core texts of the religion that exist today are the hymns known as Qawls. They have also been orally transmitted during most of their history, but are now being collected with the assent of the community, effectively transforming Yazidism into a scriptural religion. The Qawls are full of cryptic allusions and usually need to be accompanied by siroks or stories that explain their context. A belief in the reincarnation of lesser Yazidi souls also exists. Like the Ahlehaqq, the Yazidis use the metaphor of a change of garment to describe the process, which they call kiraz gururan in Kurmanji. Spiritual purification of the soul can be attained via continual reincarnation within the faith group, but it can also be halted by means of expulsion from the Yazidi community. This is the worst possible fate, since the soul's spiritual progress halts and conversion back into the faith is impossible. Alongside this notion of continuous rebirth, Yazidi theology also includes descriptions of heaven and hell, with hell extinguished, and other traditions incorporating these ideas into a belief system that includes reincarnation. Ta'uz-Melek is often identified by Muslims and Christians with Shaitan. Yazidis, however, believe Ta'uz-Melek is not a source of evil or wickedness. They consider him to be the leader of the archangels, not a fallen angel. The Yazidis of Kurdistan have been called many things, most notoriously devil worshippers, a term used both by unsympathetic neighbors and fascinated Westerners. This sensational epithet is not only deeply offensive to the Yazidis themselves but quite simply simply wrong. Non-Yazidis have associated Melektas with Shaitan or Satan, but Yazidis find it offensive and do not actually mention that name. According to claims in Encyclopedia of the Orient, the reason for the Yazidis' reputation of being devil worshippers is connected to the other name of Melektas, Shaitan, the same name the Quran has for Satan. Organization. Yazidi society is hierarchical. The secular leader is a hereditary emir, a prince, whereas a chief sheikh heads the religious hierarchy. The Yazidis are strictly endogamous members of the three Yazidi castes. The murids, sheikhs and pirs marry only within the group. Marriage outside the caste is considered a sin punishable by death to restore lost honor. The current hereditary emir of the world's Yazidi is Prince Tassin said. The current religious leader of the Yazidis, the Baba Sheikh, is Qutb Haji Ismail. Religious practices. Prayers. Yazidis have 5 daily prayers: Niveyu Baraspid, Niveyu Rojhilatin, Niveyu Nivro, Niveyu Ravari, Niveyu Rojavabun. However, most Yazidis observe only 2 of these, the sunrise and sunset prayers. Worshippers should turn the face toward the sun, and for the noon prayer, they should face toward Lalas. Such prayer should be accompanied by certain gestures, including kissing the rounded neck of the sacred shirt. The daily prayer services must not be performed in the presence of outsiders, and are always performed in the direction of the sun. Wednesday is the holy day, but Saturday is the day of rest. There is also a 3-day fast in December. Festivals. The Yazidi New Year falls in spring, on the first Wednesday of April. There is some lamentation by women in the cemeteries to the accompaniment of the music of the Kuls, but the festival is generally characterized by joyous events, the music of Dihol and Zorna, communal dancing and meals, the decorating of eggs. Similarly, the village Tawaf, a festival held in the spring in honor of the patron of the local shrine, has secular music, dance and meals in addition to the performance of sacred music. Another important festival is the Tazkiran, where Kuls and other religious dignitaries visit Yazidi villages, bringing the Senjak, sacred images of a peacock made from brass symbolizing Ta'uz Melek. These are venerated. Taxes are collected from the pious, sermons are preached and holy water distributed. The greatest festival of the year for ordinary Yazidis is the Sejna Sema, Feast of the Assembly at Lalas, a 7-day occasion, a focus of widespread pilgrimage. This is an important time for social contact and affirmation of identity. The religious center of the event is the belief in an annual gathering of the Heptad in the holy place at this time. Rituals practiced include the sacrifice of a bull at the shrine of Sex Shams and the practice of Sema pilgrimage. The most important ritual is the annual 7-day pilgrimage to the tomb of Sheikh Hadi ibn Musafir in Lalas, north of Mosul, Iraq. A sacred microcosm of the world, as it were, it contains not only many shrines dedicated to the Kozasa, but a number of other landmarks corresponding to other sites as symbols of significance in other faiths, including Pir Salit, Sirat Bridge, and a mountain called Mount Arafat. The 2 sacred springs are called Zamzam and Kania Sipi, the White Spring. If possible, Yazidis make at least one pilgrimage to Lalas during their lifetime, and those living in the region try to attend at least once a year for the autumn feast of the assembly, which is celebrated from 23 Elul to 1 Tashrin. During the celebration, Yazidis bathe in the river, wash figures of Ta'uz Melek and light hundreds of lamps in the tombs of Sexadi and other saints. They sacrifice an ox, which is one reason they have been connected to Mithraism, in addition to the presence of the dog and serpent in their iconography. The sacrifice of the ox is meant to declare the arrival of fall and to ask for precipitation during winter to bring back life to the earth in the next spring. Moreover, in astrology, the ox is the symbol of Tashran, purity and taboos. The Yazidis' concern with religious purity, and the reluctance to mix elements perceived to be incompatible, is shown in not only the caste system, but also various taboos affecting everyday life. Some of these, such as those on insulting or offending men of religion or exogamy, are both widely respected and severely enforced, such as the 2007 incident of the stoning of Doak al-Aswad, suspected of both exogamy and conversion, which made world headlines. The purity of earth, air, fire, and water is protected by a number of taboos, e.g., against spitting on earth, water, or fire. Some discourage spitting or pouring hot water on the ground because they believe that spirits or souls that may be present would be harmed or offended by such actions if they happen to be hit by the discarded liquid. Too much contact with non-Yazidis is also considered polluting. In the past, Yazidis avoided military service, which would have led them to live among Muslims, and were forbidden to share such items as cups or razors with outsiders. A resemblance to the external ear may lie behind the taboo against eating head lettuce, whose name Koas resembles Yazidi pronunciations of Koasasa. Additionally, lettuce grown near Mosul is thought by some Yazidis to be fertilized with human waste, which may contribute to the idea that it is unsuitable for consumption. However, in a BBC interview in April 2010, a senior Yazidi authority stated that ordinary Yazidis may eat what they want, but holy men refrain from certain vegetables because they cause gases. Customs at birth: the children are baptized and the males are circumcised. However, religiously speaking, circumcision is not required by Yazidism and is more dependent on regional practices and culture, with the Yazidis in Sinjar and Armenia typically leaving the males intact, while those in other regions don't. Dead are buried in conical tombs immediately after death and buried with hands crossed. Yazidis are dominantly monogamous, but chiefs may be polygamous, having more than one wife. Yazidis are exclusively endogamous. Clans do not intermarry even with other Kurds and accept no converts. They claim descent only from Adam and not from Eve. A severe punishment is expulsion, which is also effectively excommunication, as the soul of the exiled is forfeit. In 2007, an incident of honor killing, the stoning of Doak al-Aswad, made world headlines. Folklore: the tale of the Yazidis' origin found in the Black Book gives them a distinctive ancestry and expresses the feeling of difference from other races. Before the roles of the sexes were determined, Adam and Eve quarreled about which of them provided the creative element in the begetting of children. Each stored the seed in a jar which was then sealed. When Eve's was opened, it was full of insects and other unpleasant creatures, but inside Adam's jar was a beautiful boy child. This lovely child, known as son of Jah, grew up to marry a Huri and became the ancestor of the Yazidis. Therefore, the Yazidis regard themselves as descending from Adam alone, while other humans are descendants of both Adam and Eve.